Stars bled light across the obsidian stretch of space as the Vorgal Dominion swallowed another system whole. Their fleet hovered like a constellation of metal leviathans, motionless and massive, each vessel bristling with singularity cannons and veil-piercing drives. From orbit, the once thriving world of Tkora cracked open like an egg under pressure. What remained below was ash and memory. High Admiral Sithron stood on the bridge of the Devourer's Song, hands clasped behind his back, eyes reflecting the burning world beneath. He was not moved. The annihilation was routine, a purification of disorder. This was how the Dominion brought peace, by silencing chaos. Another system secured, High Admiral, reported Tactical Prime Rilek, his voice stripped of pride, emotionless as protocol dictated. Sithron nodded once. Resistance. None of significance. A few localized defense grids. All were neutralized within the projected margin. He turned away from the viewport and strode to the command dais, his boots echoing softly on the obsidian alloy floor. Begin integration protocols. The next phase of expansion requires access to the Tkora subspace channels. Rilek bowed his head and stepped away. Yet Sithron remained still, sensing a shift. Not in the fleet, not in any data feed, but in the quiet. A faint disturbance in the rhythm of victory. He turned again to the stars. In the known regions of the galaxy, there were no challengers left. The Tovarii crumbled 3 cycles ago. The twin moons of the Ellery burned for their refusal to kneel. Even the synthetic enclaves of the Mechanician Hive had been reduced to silence. The Dominion had reigned unopposed for over a century. But the silence had become unsatisfying. It was then that the whisper reached them. Not through sanctioned channels or subspace probes, but through the mouths of captured scavengers, the garbled signals of decaying satellites, and the dying breaths of a half-extinct traitor race. A name. Humans. Sithron dismissed the initial reports. Primitive. Scattered. Anomalies of evolution. Their worlds were isolated, largely invisible. But then came the anomaly. A pattern of system disruptions, a cluster of Dominion drones obliterated in uncharted space, their wreckage fused by energies unrecorded in any databank. Where? He had asked. The answer, a dead zone beyond the rim, far from the trade routes. Unworthy of conquest. Until now. And still, the data came. Not through Dominion sources, but from the undercurrent of a galactic web only the desperate used. Mercenaries. Smugglers. Survivors. They spoke in hushed tones of a vessel that shimmered like a mirage and struck like a god. A lone warship, human in origin, capable of bending the very laws the Dominion enforced. A myth, Rilek had insisted. Distractions. Ghost stories birthed by fear. Sithron was not convinced. Dispatch a recon vessel, he had ordered. Full stealth protocols. Track the energy emissions. Bring me proof. Now, days later, the recon vessel had failed to report back. A quiet hum broke the bridge's silence. An incoming signal, coded, ragged, barely decrypted. It crackled across the communication relays with static that stung the ears. Found it, by the ash corridor, initiating evasive. Then nothing. Sithron stared at the blank screen long after it faded. Set course for the ash corridor, he said. Rilek hesitated. With respect, High Admiral, the ash corridor is considered unstable. Navigating it with a fleet. Not the fleet, Sithron said sharply. Just the Devourer's Song. If the myths are true, then I must see this warship for myself. If they are false, then the matter ends. Yes, High Admiral. Rilek bowed lower this time. As preparations began, Sithron lingered at the viewport once more. This time, his eyes weren't on the dead world below but beyond, into the void where myths were born and, sometimes, where empires died. Far from the Dominion's hold, in the dust-choked silence of the ash corridor, a single ship drifted. Vast, angular, armored in a dull, irregular alloy. It bore no insignia, no registry, no identification. Its name was etched only into the minds of those who dared approach and lived. Oblivion. Within its silent corridors, a captain stood motionless, her gaze fixed on an old, flickering holomap of the stars. Her eyes were tired, her uniform scorched at the sleeves. She had no empire, no nation. Just a purpose. The ship's AI flickered to life beside her, forming the vague silhouette of a man. "They're coming," it said simply. She nodded. "Let them." The Dominion thought itself a god. It had never met a ghost. The stars here were different, dimmer, half-dead things flickering behind fields of interstellar ash. The ash corridor was a graveyard, a stretch of space even the boldest navigators avoided. But in its shadow drifted a relic of war, a thing out of time and purpose. They called it Oblivion, though none who spoke the name had seen it and lived. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge, her boots anchored to the alloy floor like roots to fractured soil. Her uniform bore no insignia. The colors had long faded, burnt away during the fall. A silver streak cut through her raven-black hair, a mark earned when the orbital station over Europa collapsed. She remembered the screaming, the silence that followed, and the moment the ship's AI asked her if survival was still a priority. It had been 10 years since Earth fell. The Dominion hadn't even aimed at Earth. It was a side effect, collateral in a sector-wide sweep to remove primitive interference. The Council fled. The fleets disbanded. Colonies went dark. Humanity fractured into whispers. But Oblivion remained. She had been the last deep space prototype, never formally commissioned. Her activation had been premature, a last resort. A mistake, perhaps. But mistakes had power. "Long-range sensors have detected movement at sector fringe," said the AI, its voice a calm baritone that barely echoed in the vastness of the command deck. Ilara turned toward the central console, the holographic display shimmering to life. One red mark blinked among a field of static. "Confirm identity. Unknown configuration. High-energy profile consistent with Dominion capital ships. Single signature." She narrowed her eyes. "Just one." "Yes, Captain. They're sending a scout. Not a fleet." Curious behavior. Curious was generous. Arrogant was more accurate. "They don't know what we are yet," she murmured. She studied the tactical interface, running scenarios in her mind. The Dominion didn't make half measures unless it thought the risk was minimal. They were used to crushing before questioning. This ship, this scout, would be an emissary of certainty. A surgical strike to confirm a ghost's existence. AI, prepare for conflict. Silent protocol until they cross the boundary. Affirmative. Cloaking maintained. Weapons on standby. She leaned against the console, fingers drumming lightly. Her crew, what was left of it, was already at their stations. Talek, her tactical officer, ex-UN Navy and missing half a lung, monitored weapons from the lower deck. Sarah, her sensor tech, formerly of Europa's moons, rerouted power like a magician playing a game only she understood. And Reese, the last engineer of a broken world, kept Oblivion breathing with nothing more than stubbornness and caffeine pills. They were ghosts in every sense, unregistered, unfound, unwanted. But in the Dominion's empire of silence, even a whisper could fracture mountains. "They're accelerating," the AI announced. "ETA. 17 minutes. Shall I deploy drones for interception?" "No," Ilara said. "Let them see us. Let them get close." Talek's voice crackled through the comms. "That's a hell of a gamble, Captain." She smiled faintly. "Only if we lose." The bridge fell into quiet preparation. Lights dimmed. Systems shifted into silent overdrive. There was no panic here, only memory, ritual. They had done this before. 4 times. Each time the Dominion sent more. The first had been a drone fleet. It never reported back. The second, a cruiser. It disintegrated before firing a single shot. The third and fourth had almost succeeded, almost. Each battle left scars on Oblivion's hull, but also data. Experience. Evolution. The AI learned, adapted. So did Ilara. 5 minutes to contact, the AI said. They are scanning aggressively. They still haven't detected us. Good, she replied. Let's give them something to remember. On the screen, the scout ship drew close, sleek, obsidian black, its surface shimmering with active shielding. It slowed slightly, puzzled by the silence. It must have expected a decaying hull, a forgotten satellite. Not this. No. The void ignited. A single shot burst from Oblivion's forward cannon, its signature warped by anti-detection fields until the last possible second. The Dominion scout flared as shielding collapsed, hull punctured through by a pulse of compressed plasma and gravitational flux. It didn't explode, it folded, twisting in on itself as its core destabilized, imploding into a silence so absolute it felt like grief. On the bridge, Ilara exhaled slowly. Report. Target neutralized, the AI confirmed. Minimal energy expenditure. Hull integrity uncompromised. Any chance they transmitted before impact? Unlikely. The pulse disrupted their subspace relay before message lock. She nodded, a ghost of satisfaction crossing her face. But her eyes returned to the screen. Even in victory, her gaze searched for the next threat. "They'll come looking," Tolek said through the intercom, his voice low now. "They will," Ilara replied. "And they'll bring more." Behind her, the AI flickered to life again. "We have time. But not much." She turned her back to the stars, eyes landing on the old Earth flag stitched into the wall behind the command chair, worn, faded, barely visible. "Then we make every minute count." The Dominion returned not with a scout, but a fleet. 7 warships breached the edge of the ash corridor, formation tight, weapons primed, every system calibrated to annihilate. The Devourer's song led the charge, its silhouette dwarfing the rest. High Admiral Sithrin stood at its helm, eyes colder than the vacuum outside. No more doubt. No more whispers. The anomaly would be erased. They expected a confrontation. They received silence. "Sector scan confirms no movement," Rilek reported, scanning the void. "Oblivion is not broadcasting." Sithrin stared into the dark, unnerved by its stillness. "It's here. They want us blind." He was right. In Oblivion's war room, the crew moved with synchronized precision. The ship remained dark, engines dormant, a corpse waiting to wake. "They've entered engagement range," said Tolek, his voice taut with focus. "They're sweeping with phased resonance scans." "They're looking for movement, not shadows," Ilara replied, eyes fixed on the growing wave of heat signatures. "Let them get close." "They'll lock on," Sarah warned. "They'll try." Ilara paced slowly, hands clasped behind her back. The moment had arrived. This wasn't a skirmish. They weren't chasing ghosts anymore. The Dominion had brought their judgment. Oblivion would give them war. AI, activate Phantom Protocol. Execute strike pattern Theta 7. Acknowledged. The lights on the ship shifted. Weapons deployed with silent elegance, dozens of hardpoints blooming open like steel flowers. The cloaking veil shimmered once, and then fell. In the void, Oblivion appeared. A gasp rippled through the Dominion comms. The ship was larger than expected. Older. Stranger. Its design didn't follow conventional logic, angles clashed with curves, and its hull shimmered faintly with a distortion field that made targeting unstable. "They've decloaked," Rilek said. "Energy spikes, weapon systems active." "Engage." Sithrin roared. The battle ignited instantly. The Dominion opened with coordinated precision. Ion lances carved across the space where Oblivion had hovered, but the warship was gone, shifting through localized warp jumps that made it impossible to track. It danced between blasts, returning fire with devastating bursts of gravity compression and directed dark energy spikes that pierced shields and shredded hulls. One Dominion frigate imploded after a single strike. Another drifted, systems melted, crews screaming into the abyss. Inside Oblivion, the AI orchestrated the assault like a symphony, timing jumps with millisecond perfection, anticipating the fleet's countermeasures before they were launched. "They're adapting," Tolek warned. "Switching to widespread patterns. They're trying to box us in." "Let them try," Ilara said, gripping the edge of the command console. "Deploy subspace mines on Vector 4. Set them to detonate on distortion triggers." Outside, invisible mines scattered like dust. The Dominion ships advanced, then burst into fragments as space folded and tore. Chaos erupted. Sithrin watched the feed with something approaching disbelief. This was not a skirmish. This was a dismantling. For every hit they landed, they suffered 4. Their technological superiority was being undone by strategy, by anticipation. "How is this possible?" Rilek whispered. It's not just the ship, Sithron said. It's the mind behind it. He tapped his command terminal. Recall forward ships. Form a sphere and prepare singularity cannon. Even as he gave the order, 2 more ships collapsed. One, gutted by an internal explosion as Oblivion hacked its thermal regulators. Another, rammed by a sudden kinetic burst, momentum from nowhere. On the warship, Ilara's focus narrowed. They're preparing their heavy cannon, the AI noted. We're within probable targeting zone. Then we vanish, she replied. Jump us. Partial warp. Random vector. The stars bent, and Oblivion blinked away. The Dominion's cannon fired into nothing, tearing a hole in the void that would take hours to restabilize. When Oblivion reappeared, it was behind them. They're flanking us, Rilek cried. Turn the Devourer's song. Sithron ordered, but it was too late. Oblivion's main cannon powered up, a silent swell of violet light gathering at its core. With a thunderless pulse, the energy lanced forward, tearing through the Dominion flagship's shields and gouging a molten wound across its upper hull. Inside, alarms screamed. Fire burst through the command deck. Sithron hit the floor, blood in his mouth, but he pulled himself up. We're not finished, he growled. On Oblivion, the crew felt the tremble of counterfire. The ship rocked, hull plating groaning. Shields at 40%. Sarah called. Divert power from the outer ring. Seal decks 7 through 9, Ilara ordered. Buy us 3 more minutes. Sithron's ship burned. Ilara's ship bled. But neither fell. They were no longer myth and empire. They were equals, matched not in numbers or firepower, but in resolve. As Oblivion turned for a final strike, Sithron gave a single order, retreat. The Dominion fleet, reduced to half, obeyed. On the command deck, silence returned. They're running, Tolek breathed. They're actually running. No, Ilara whispered. They're thinking. For the first time in a century, they're uncertain. She turned her gaze outward, toward the dark beyond where stars still burned. Somewhere out there, the next wave was already assembling. But now they would hesitate. Now they knew her name. The Dominion did not retreat often. When they did, it was not out of fear, but recalibration. High Admiral Sithron stared at the projection of Oblivion, suspended in a warping veil of interference. He had never seen a vessel that moved like that thought like that. It wasn't a weapon. It was a predator. The fleet sustained significant losses, Rilek said, voice low. 4 vessels destroyed. 2 beyond repair. Devourer's song requires 3 cycles to restore shielding. Sithron didn't respond immediately. He stood motionless in the low light of the command sanctum, surrounded by ghostly blue projections of the battle, every maneuver, every failure, every anomaly. She knew our tactics before we deployed them, he said finally. She knew our formation weaknesses, our signal frequencies. She knew Dominion doctrine better than most Dominion commanders. Human espionage? Rilek asked. Possible corruption? No. Something deeper. Sithron turned, his voice sharpened. She's not a survivor. She's a tactician. A relic of war honed in shadows while we grew complacent. He stepped forward, isolating a fragment of Oblivion's energy signature on the display. This ship didn't evolve during peace. It was forged for extinction. Rilek's throat worked, but he said nothing. Dispatch a signal to the core worlds. Authorization. Omega Vermilion. Inform the Archon that the frontier has awakened. A full-scale invasion? Sithron shook his head. No, not yet. She expects that. We need something unexpected. Meanwhile, on Oblivion, the silence after battle was always the most dangerous. The adrenaline faded. The damage revealed itself. And the weight of survival pressed down. We lost containment integrity on Deck 9, Sarah reported, adjusting the flow of auxiliary coolant through the backup stabilizers. Minor casualties. Reese is sealing the breaches manually. Ilara sat in the command chair for the first time in hours, letting her body feel the exhaustion. The battle had been costly, not in numbers, but in time, in fuel, in the resilience of her crew. She was used to operating as a myth, a ghost. But now, the Dominion had seen her. And more importantly, she had seen them bleed. "They're not invincible," she said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. "No," replied the AI, materializing beside her, faint and flickering. "But they're evolving. So must we." Ilara rubbed her eyes. "They'll return. Stronger. Less predictable." Yes. Their retreat was not defeat. It was a pause. She exhaled slowly. "Then we don't wait. We take the initiative." Tulek raised a brow from the lower deck. "You're talking preemptive strike?" "I'm talking message," she said, rising. "We've proven we're not just an anomaly. But they still think we're alone." She walked to the side console and brought up a star map, a complex network of hidden channels, silent systems, buried allies. The resistance hadn't died. It had scattered, faded, but there were still embers. "We light the fires again." The crew exchanged glances. No one protested. Outside, Oblivion began to shift, its hull groaning as systems realigned. The warship was old, but it was not finished. It bore scars, but it remembered every battle, every loss, every silence. And now, it moved not to survive, but to speak. Ilara stood before the ship's core transmitter, ancient and unregistered, a signal system so archaic it bypassed Dominion filters entirely. She keyed in a code she hadn't used in a decade. A low tone sounded. The message was simple. "Oblivion lives. The fire is not out." Somewhere in the shadowed edges of known space, old receivers stirred. Hidden bunkers, outlaw colonies, silent stations built into asteroid husks, all flickered with the pulse of a forgotten name. And in the deepest corners, where no one dared speak against the Dominion, someone smiled. Back in the Dominion core, the Archon of Dominion Command listened to the encrypted message on a private channel. He stood in his tower of black crystal, surrounded by star charts soaked in red. "She's resurfaced," he said. "The captain of Oblivion." His aide tilted his head. "A myth, Your Grace. One vessel." "No," the Archon said. "An idea. Ideas are harder to kill." He gestured, and a hollow of the High Admiral appeared. "Send Sithran what he needs. And prepare the Inquisitors. If she's awakening ghosts, we'll bury them properly this time." As the stars shifted and the map of war was drawn again, Oblivion sailed deeper into the ash, not to hide, but to hunt. Behind her trailed more than silence. She carried the weight of a world that would not die quietly.